Live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thanks for joining us. We are continuing our coverage here at Fox 12 Oregon of the protests at Portland State University and from what has happened this morning, which was at around 6 a.m. A Portland police unit went in and actually cleared out the Miller Library there on the Portland State University campus. We're going to be discussing that and how that all went down. We've got footage and we've got a lot of guests that are going to be joining us here. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, and on our website and our apps, so you can stick right with us. Obviously, this is a situation that is still developing as far as information that we're getting, but we do have a lot that we're going to be getting to you here during this. But to start off right now, we're joined by former commanding officer of the Metropolitan Division for the LAPD. We've got Brian Bixler joining us. And Brian, thank you very much. Retired LAPD captain, obviously a lot of experience in this. And, I think to start off, appreciate you being here, but looking at this operation that went down here with the Portland police, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in situations that may be like this?
Absolutely. So, over 27 years with the LAPD, we had lots of civil unrest and items like this. And so a lot of what we dealt with was people wanting to occupy a space, whether it's in the middle of an intersection or whether it's a building. And it becomes, one, if it's a private property, you need to have the consent of whoever owns it. In this case, it's, the Portland State University staff, just like they were dealing with at USC and UCLA down here. So you need to make sure that you're all on the same page. You all want the same things. If they're asking for our assistance, then we need to know the parameters of what it is they're asking us to do. So in my experience, it is frustrating at first because you need to make sure everybody's aligned. And a lot of times it's fine until something goes sideways. But so that's kind of my experience. And then when you actually do get in, and finally, when you get somebody to actually make a decision to say, we're going to move in clear, or we're going to make arrests, it's at that point, then as a police commander or a captain and in charge of a unit, then you have clear direction of what it is you're going to do. And you know what your tactics already are. So you're going to go in. And if they say, we want everybody arrested, then you make plans to have everybody arrested. I'm sorry, I'm at the police academy. So if there's gunfire in the background, it's just qualification. So that's kind of what we've seen. And it's always a good plan until you make first contact with whoever you're trying to arrest. And it's really on them. It's if they're going to comply or if they have plans to be physically disobedient, more violent, and that can change tactics. But it's always you're well prepared and you think of all the contingencies, but it's still very dynamic and it can be very dangerous.
I mean, that planning that must go into that. So as you mentioned there, that coordination that's necessary between, obviously for this situation, the university, several organizations all working together to do that. And it does seem like that alignment came as far as this operation to go in there and clear out that library. So when you're preparing for that, you mentioned, when you make first contact, and I guess even before the first contact, going into the building, one of the things that Portland police said that they did is actually went from the top down. For that kind of strategy, do you think that's something that is typically done in situations like this? And how exactly, would that go about as far as getting up there to the top and then worrying about encountering anybody at that point?
Yeah, I don't know what their tactics were. And again, every situation is different. Every building is different. In my last assignment as Metropolitan, I was in charge of the LAPD SWAT team, and they trained over and over again, and they would go to different locations and broken down buildings to try and say, okay, what if this, what if that? So that's what Portland Police Bureau, they were like, hey, the best, and I'm not going to speak to their tactics, how they got to that top floor, but there's ways you can do that. There's helicopter insertion, there's ropes, I don't know what the setup, there can be back entrances, but they thought it out and said, this is going to be the safest way to get everybody out of there. And I know they give plenty of warnings. To me, the biggest piece is communicate with your team and with those you're going to arrest. And if they said, look, we've let you know you're violating the law. It's trespass, it's felony vandalism, all these things. So they communicated them, and here's what's going to happen. We are going to come in and we are going to arrest you. Now we want the element of surprise to be on our side so that they don't know where we're coming, so that we can get them a little off balance so they can't mount a counterattack if that's in their heart or mind to do.
And to that extent, too, looking at some of the footage that Portland police put out of them entering the building, I've got some of that right here. I'll pull that up. This is, I believe, some of their body cam footage or something along those lines, footage that they put out.
Yeah.
Yeah, showing them going in there. And one of the things that they did talk about is they did encounter, there was apparently some kind of a slick substance that was on the floor that you can actually hear some of the officers talking about that and calling it out. Is that something that you would expect as you're going in? I would imagine like the mind frame has got to be a little bit difficult to figure out because you don't really know what you're going to encounter. So what is the mind frame of an officer going in like that?
That you expect danger around every corner, that you're expecting confrontation so that if it actually does come, you're not surprised by it. So that's why we train over and over again, force on force. So we have role players that are going to come out and do the unexpected. Because like you said, you don't know what these people are thinking. You can, know what you happened last time, but they change tactics on us. Just like, so our tactics have to evolve. So in their mindset, they're ready for anything. And they believe that there can be a threat around any corner, that there's a suspect wanting to do them harm, hiding around every corner. And like when it comes to substances, you don't know what it is, or could be even an improvised explosive device or something like that. So they have to be ready for everything. And that's looks like their training kicked in, and that's what they do.
And when you talk about training like this, and I know we can't speak specifically to the Portland Police, but in general, you mentioned earlier, some of the SWAT teams training for all different kinds of situations. So is that something similar probably to what they do as far as going into buildings like this? Would this be a typical training exercise?
Absolutely. So like I said, we would take an old abandoned building or a building that somebody gives us access to that we're not used to, because every building's different. And so I'm sure this is what they did. And again, this is not a SWAT team, probably. It's probably the public order unit out of the Portland Police Bureau. And I'm sure they trained just like my officers did in Metropolitan Division, who are part of our crowd control units. They would go out and we would give them unique environments to train in as much as we could. So there wasn't anything that was completely a surprise, although, like I said, every place is unique.
Right. You never know exactly what's going to be there. And to that extent, too, I was going to pull up something else just to get your opinion on this. They did post some pictures of some items that they found. Apparently some kind of a ball bearing or a bearing in flour. This is kind of going through the pictures quick, but we'll let these circulate. Sure. And then cups of paint. I'm not even sure what this is, some kind of leather piece of some kind that was said to wear under clothes, and then paint balloons. Speaking about these kinds of things, I guess, is this something that you have encountered before in some of your previous work?
Absolutely. So, and again, the tactics will change, but the paint, so that as a crowd control, they try to protect their faith. So they have a plexiglass shield like they did at Portland Police Bureau. We have the same. So we saw a lot of people throwing paint, balloons to try and obscure our vision. The flour, again, would obscure your vision. And also the ball bearings, you could be very slippery. So again, this is not just an intent to distract. These are actually very violent and can lead to major injuries for officers and others. So yeah, those are tactics we've seen. Everything from the umbrellas to using urine in water bottles or squirt guns to try and, again, blind officers, make them ineffective at their job and disorient them and hurt them.
And actually, I think on that table there where they did have the cups of paint, there were some water bottles there that I believe it even said on it ink. That will clarify. But yeah, so that sounds like that's something that's typical that you would encounter in these situations.
Yeah, and it would again, and it's this is not mostly peaceful. That is a deliberate planning attempt at hurting and injuring police officers.
And looking at that, as they go through it and they cleared out the building, there is footage of that we have here of some of the protesters who were fleeing out the front as they were coming through. For a police operation like this, obviously you've got the officers going inside, but I would imagine you have to really secure a perimeter around that as well to make sure, again, not knowing exactly what's going to happen, but not knowing where these people are going to go.
For sure, and that's part of what we do when we do our operations. Say there's somebody chained together, we have an external blocking force that will protect those officers who are going in to make the arrest. But in like this case, you see these people running towards a police line. One decides, I'm going to run right into the police officer, which probably wasn't the smartest. And then obviously the crowd tries to take him away from police custody, and police were successful in detaining that individual. But that's an attack on a police officer right there, and they were ready for that. And again, that's like the two pieces. You need to protect and also protect the officers on the inside who were making the arrests.
When you look at some of these operations that are going around, I'm sure you've been following this, and UCLA being one of the one of the places that's getting a lot of attention as far as how that went down. You've got Columbia
Sure.
University and universities all over the
Yep.
place. How would you compare the Portland police response, just from what you know, and Portland State University compared to some of those responses at UCLA and, say, Columbia?
So I think, again, to me, it's once the administrators of the universities and the public officials, who, again, should bear the brunt of the accountability on these things, once they make a decision that, yes, we're going to allow the police to do their job. At that point, it looks like all the police departments have done a fantastic job at pre-planning, making sure that they reduce the possibility of injury to all parties. They're making a decisive decision, and they're going in and doing what needs to be done to restore order to these campuses.
Throughout your career, with so many years on this, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen from when you started to where we are now with some of these, I guess, protests, especially over the last few years?
We've seen, one, we have, I think, a greater understanding of the psychological impact on our police officers. When you're asking a police officer to stand out on a line in front of people who are hurling insults that most of us would never even hear before, and realizing they're insulting your kids, your family, threatening to kill your kids, your family, and people are like, oh, they're just peaceful protests, but that's the psychological impact on the officers. So in the recent years, we've really been cognizant of that, and then taking officers off the line. Like, let's replace them with somebody fresh. If they're really getting on some officer's skin, we're going to give them a break. So it's that giving them a chance to breathe and decompress. The other thing we've talked a lot is de-escalation, verbal de-escalation, making sure we're like, look, this is what's going to happen. We're being very clear. We're giving people time to disperse. And so those are some of the biggest things, is that communication piece, and understanding what the psychological impact it has on our officers. And then as far as the tactics, we know that recently you've got, with the advent of cell phones, protesters back in the day, they were just kind of doing it by feel. Now they're very coordinated, and they'll say, hey, there's officers, there's not many officers over here. Let's go there, see if we can break through. So it's become a lot more fast-paced and more reactionary, because these people communicate as quickly as we do, or faster.
From your perspective, what do you think is the most important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about, that balancing of First Amendment rights versus taking over a building like they did there at the library? From the police standpoint, how do you find that balance on that line of maintaining peace but also allowing demonstrations?
It is when the right of the protester impinges on everybody else's rights. So the rights of the business owners to open their business, the right of people to walk down a street without being accosted by somebody. When those two are at odds, that's when law and order needs to be restored. And I think that's what people forget, is that, yes, the First Amendment right, please, our country is founded on it. I love, and I always, as a captain, I'd walk up and say, hey, we're going to facilitate your First Amendment rights until that point when it starts to impinge upon the rights of others to live their lives freely. And so I think from a police perspective, that's the line we have to walk. And when politicians sometimes will say, well, we're going to let them break the law just this little bit, well, then it's kind of a slippery slope, as we've seen. We'll let them protest on the steps. We'll let them protest inside. Now they take over the library. So it comes when when those two things compete, you got to make a decision.
I think one more question I have here too, just when it comes to, now that the fact that the library's been cleared out, it's essentially that's what they've said. Some arrests have been made. I know that they're, according to the press conference that they just had, so we're still getting more information on that, but they're looking for other individuals. It sounds like active situation. But what comes next for the police now that the building is cleared? What do they do when they're in there as far as ascertaining, what happened?
So it's going to be now a documentation. So you got to document all of the crimes that occurred in there, the vandalism, and then it's going to be up to the detectives to go back through and see if and the criminal justice system to make reports, criminal reports, and then prosecute if necessary or if wanted. There's been lots of protests, and down here, in 2021, and we had lots of protests and lots of arrests, and prosecutions happened months afterwards, after the investigation was done. So now it's going to be documenting the damage that occurred, what kind of vandalism occurred, and if somebody can be, it can be proved that somebody actually perpetrated those acts of criminal, the criminal nature, and then going and investigating and prosecuting those.
When it comes to the going back to what you talked about earlier, that coordination between different departments. You have the university, obviously the city, you've got the police department. Do you think situations like this can help maybe further that coordination in these situations going forward?
Absolutely, because every time if you get into a situation, and on the backside of it, you do we call a hot wash or a debrief, and find out what can we do better, how can we better coordinate together, and every time we do that, it's an opportunity to get better at what we do. So yeah, anytime we can now, I think probably the folks at Portland State University are going to have a better understanding of how police interact with that institution, how different police agencies interact with each other, and how to be more efficient and kind of preemptive on the next time, hopefully.
I'm sorry, I keep having more questions once I'm talking to you because you have so much knowledge. One other thing then, I keep saying one other thing. When you talked about de-escalation and those tactics, and obviously I'm going to guess that those have changed over the years. You mentioned trading out police officers if somebody's, getting tired or something's getting under their skin. What are some of the main de-escalation tactics that the police would have gone through in this situation?
It starts with command presence. It's just the physical presence of you being there, bringing a physical deterrent. But then the de-escalation piece is also talking to people down, not going to their level of yelling at you. And if I have a police officer go, I understand. So it starts at that level. But at some point, de-escalation can be somebody super heightened, and you may have to use a tool like the 40mm less lethal launcher that they've been using, because if you have one person who's being violent towards you and is intent on using a criminal act, by firing a less lethal round, which is like kind of getting a racquetball thrown at you by a major league pitcher, then other people might see that and go, oh, I don't want that. That can be a de-escalation as well. So it's everywhere from physical presence to verbal de-escalation to actually using de-escalation tools that may be a use of force.
Well, Brian, I want to say thank you very much for joining us, here to talk about this and walk through this and sharing your experience and your knowledge of that, of everything that's gone on. Really appreciate it. Anything else that you think people should know?
No, I mean, again, just a reminder that police officers are humans. They have families just like everybody else out there, and they're doing a job to protect and serve the public. And we need to give them that respect and the honor that's due them.
Well, Brian, thank you very much for being here on Fox 12 Now. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Great conversation there. So for everybody watching, we're live here. We're going to continue on. I believe we're going to be joined by Connor McCarthy here shortly, who's obviously one of our reporters who's been down there live on the scene. So he's going to be hopping in here in a second. But I did want to, while we're waiting for that, let's pull up just a little bit more footage here just so you can see some of the things that went on. We've got some general footage over the last day or so that we're going to show here. And I'm going to take a look also at the press conference that did take place, and I'll give you some of the highlights of that. So that was a press conference earlier today with a number of people. They had Ted Wheeler in there. You had the mayor. You had the head of Bride Day. You had the police chief and also PSU president and a number of other people, also Mike Schmidt as well. So what they said, this was Sergeant Allen with the Portland Police Bureau talking about the operation this morning, starting about 6 a.m. You had, it was a strategy. These are some highlights from this press conference. Strategy is start at the top of the building and work their way down. They said they encountered barricades and things in the way to slow down officers. We've seen some of those pictures in a lot of areas, a lot of different pictures that have come out as far as showing the chairs and tables stacked up to slow them down as they went through. As of this press conference, and again, we don't know we'll get you more information as far as what's happened since then, but as far as arrests, there were 12 arrests. 2 minor injuries to officers. 4 arrests were believed to be PSU students. So of the 12 that were arrested, 4 were believed to be students, 8 were not. So that's what we know so far. 1 officer was sprayed with a fire extinguisher, and the person who did it was arrested. And we do have some of that video of the people running out of the building and attempting to flee there. We're going to go ahead and bring Connor in here. Let me get this pulled up. So again, we're live streaming. We're live right now, and Connor's live on the scene down there. Connor, let's see if I can get you in there. I'll fix our lower third as well. But Connor, thanks for joining us. I know you've been out there. We've talked several times over the last few days as you've been out there doing this coverage. So today, finally this operation happened. What was it like for you? What's it like down there right now?
Well, right now, everything's currently at a stalemate that we've been watching as police officers as well as protesters go meaning the protesters chanting anti-police messaging, free Palestine messaging at the officers. We've been watching really shift changes between the officers that are holding the police line. Let me flip the camera around so I can kind of show you what's happening here. You can see that the police officers are still holding the protesters at bay here in front of the library. And we did watch someone just go in police tape. I don't think he really understands that this area is closed, but the university did close the library, officially closing it, making it anyone on property criminally trespassing. That pretty much set the stage for what we're seeing here today. Yesterday, we also saw Portland State University police served the official notice saying the protesters inside are criminally trespassing. Portland police sent out another warning to people inside to leave the building, and then around 6 o'clock this morning, that's when officers from both Portland police as well as Portland State Police finally moved in.
And when they were moving in, I don't know what the situation was like exactly, because obviously they went from the top of the building down. So was there an indication, a public indication, that they were going to go in, or was it just more, I guess, keeping that under wraps?
Well, I was asleep during that. I was around 6 o'clock. I don't start my shift until about 10 o'clock. But what I saw from emails is that Portland Police did send the media a press release. So they'll learn about 5:55 this morning, and then about minutes later, that's when the word was given to for the police to move in and start clearing out the building. But since then, the protesters eventually ran out about mid-morning, and everything spilled out into the streets of Portland. I did witness some arrests when I first arrived here on scene, and we also watched protesters block roads that blocked the on-ramp to Interstate 405, the southbound lanes, as well as the lanes to Barber Boulevard. And as everyone knows that drives in Portland, that area of roads there with Highway 26, getting onto the Ross Island Bridge, Interstate 5, I-405, that's a very critical junction for commuter traffic at that time of the morning. But eventually, things moved back onto campus. And again, this is where we are at now. Police officers are holding protesters at bay. And it's just a stalemate at this point.
Yeah, I'm seeing that right there. So that definitely a big police presence. With all the protesters that are still there, how active is that scene? Are there, are they just hanging out? Is there a lot of yelling? Is there a lot of action going on right there, or is it more just kind of a standoff between the two?
There's a lot of yelling, a lot of messages directed towards police, a lot of anti-police messaging, messages that have profanity in them that we obviously can't say while we were on the air. But we've seen actually a lot of the crowd dwindle throughout the afternoon. One of our security guards actually showed me a photo from what is believed to be from the protesters doing an all call out to campus, asking students to come and join them. But the likelihood of that, from after talking to a handful of students, a lot of students are very tired of having their library closed. They agree with the core of the messaging, which is free Palestine, but a lot of students are very tired of not being able to use their library. They're in the middle of midterms. They're on the quarter system that moves fast. So just losing just a week of school is a tenth of your term gone. There's a lot of stress among students, especially seniors. I talked to one graduate student yesterday who says that she is trying to finish her senior capstone class, and those classes are canceled this weekend, and it's the only class she needs to graduate. So that's on the top of her mind. But then you'll talk to the protesters who say, well, the vandalism, classes canceled, is nothing compared to what's happening in Palestine. With, as we know, thousands of people have been killed and in the war in Palestine. So you hear it from both sides, but at the moment, this is what we're live looking at. It's a stalemate. Nothing has really moved since about 10:30 when officers allowed students to be back on campus.
And looking at the police tape there, is that area generally closed off as far as public access? I know it's gone back and forth as far as what the library was going to be open, or some of the buildings were going to be open. And I know right now, I believe the library is closed, obviously. Any indication when they're going to open that area back up to the public?
It's unclear at this point. Let me just kind of show you around what's going on.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
On the
and for everybody
end.
joining, Connor's down there right now live at Portland State. So.
this is about the south side of the main core campus of the library. You can see that there are some people just kind of hanging out watching out in the distance. I know sometimes the camera kind of makes it look farther than it appears, as if you take pictures on your phone, you might be aware of that, but just kind of panning around, you can see that this area is pretty much closed off. I know, I'm not sure if you talked to Paulina yet, but we've been watching crews over there start clearing out the stairwell, all the barricades, all the trash and garbage, and bringing some furniture that belong inside the library back into the building. But University President Ann Cudd was actually asked when the library might be open, but she says it is unclear at this point and is closed at the moment. You can see there's just a lot of graffiti, a lot of trash damage that needs to be cleaned up. So it could be some time before students can access the library and access some study spaces.
Yeah, look at that right there. So that for everybody, that was the library that Connor was just showing right there of that. Yeah, you can see some of that graffiti on there. How extensive is the graffiti outside of the library? Is there graffiti on other buildings right around there?
There's graffiti mainly on the main library. There's some graffiti on other buildings across the quad. Some of the graffiti, I'm trying not to show too much of it, but there is profanity on there about Boeing. And as we know, one of the main demands is they want the university to completely divest in Boeing. That Boeing not only makes airplanes, they do make military aircraft for the United States military that sends over to its allies through USAID. But the university president announced last Friday that she would pause gifts from Boeing, but for protesters, that wasn't enough, and which led to them taking over the library and being barricaded in there for about 3 or 4 days.
And that is where we're at right now. So are you going to be continuing to be down there monitoring this here throughout the afternoon? Do you expect anything else to be going on?
Well, we'll be monitoring this throughout the afternoon. We're going to see potentially the protesters will be moved off campus. Campus is technically closed, but that just really means the buildings themselves are locked. The university says that there's a shelter in place for students in dorms. It's an urban campus, so it's really hard to keep just anyone in the community off and really close down the full of the campus. But we'll keep an eye on it, and tonight later I'll have the responses from the governor. The governor has sent a very strong statement condemning what's happening here at PSU. I've talked to some faculty members as well, so you'll hear more of that tonight on 4 o'clock news.
And so the governor making that statement, and clearly there's the other issue too that happened across town. I know we have other people covering that as far as some police cars being burned. They said they didn't know if those two things were connected, but clearly, definitely a lot going on as far as investigations right now. And we'll see. I guess the next thing is to see what happens with these protesters there that are still there at Portland State. And Connor, thank you. Anything else that you think people should know about, or that you wanted to share about what's going down there? I mean, you've really been there in the heart of it.
Yeah, I think another thing just to share to people that are watching right now, I know the protesters are saying these are all students. They say that this is a student movement. Initially started off as a student movement, but as the arrests tell you from Portland police, a majority of those arrests, 8 out of 12 of those arrests were non-students. So many students on campus that I've talked with believe that the people behind the violence and the vandalism are non-students, and it's very frustrating to them because they just want their campus back.
Yeah. For 8 of those 12, arrested were non-students so far. That does remind me of one other thing actually that we talked about yesterday. So there was that offer that the PSU president gave 2 students who were in the library, I believe yesterday or maybe 2 days ago, that if they left, there would be no consequences as far as expulsion or suspension. And at the time, it was estimated to be about 50 people left. Do we have any clarification on that number, or is it still just that's what was said, so that's what we're going off of?
That's what was said so far. That is what we're going off of. The president of the university didn't address that during a joint press conference with the county district district attorney, as well as Mayor Ted Wheeler. But she did say the people that were still in the building that are students, especially those that are arrested, will also fall under any policies that were broken, that the student policies that all university students have to sign when they get enrolled here at PSU.
All right. Well, Connor, thank you very much. For being down there, reporting on this, and joining us here on Fox 12 Now. It's really beneficial, I think, for everybody just hearing a firsthand account of what's happening down there and being able to see it. I mean, you're there live with your phone, showing us what exactly is going on. So, thanks. I'll let you get back to it, and I appreciate you being here.
All right, thanks so much.
All right, and for everybody watching again, we are recapping and going through here what has gone on down there at Portland State. Let's do a little bit of recapping again of this. We're gonna take a look there at some of the footage. This is from a couple of days ago. We do have, again, if you are just tuning in and you were unaware, the library was cleared out earlier today. Portland police came in. They went from the roof on down and cleared protesters. 12 arrests were made. 8 of them were non-students, 4 students, a couple of minor injuries. A police officer was attacked with a fire extinguisher, and the person who did that was arrested. And we have some other video footage as well of this. We're going to continue this coverage here throughout the afternoon. We've got, I believe, Ezra Kaplan, our reporter, is going to be joining us here in just a little bit, and we'll have some other experts joining us to talk about this. We're going to take a break just to reset. But whatever platform you're watching us on, we will be back, and we'll be joining you with more coverage of this. So just stay tuned. Probably about 15 minutes or so, we'll be back with some more coverage of what's happening. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.